and podcast world. I hope you're having a great day. You're listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh Blissett. Today's episode is an exciting one. We have Daikin Applied here with us, and we're going to talk about refrigerant. And if you've been in the industry very long, you've experienced possibly going from R12 to 22 or to 134, and then from a R22 phase out to a 410A. I mean, we're still kind of battling some R22 systems out there. But some of you may not realize that refrigerant 410A is also going to be phased out. And so today we're going to talk about R32 and Daikin Applied and how they fit into all of this, and just some things honestly that I didn't even know about before going to the AHR Expo. And that's where we originally met. I watched PJ give an announcement there at the AHR Expo about the introduction of the R32 and everything. It was super interesting, and we had a lot of good feedback sorry, from our Instagram. I think I Instagram live feed it, and maybe Facebook. I can't remember. It seems like such a long time ago. But anyways, welcome to the show, Susan and PJ.
Hey, thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. If you wouldn't mind, really quick, would you both give an introduction of yourself and kind of explain who you are and a little bit about how long you've been with Daikin?
Sure. My name's Philip Johnston. It'll probably come up. People call me PJ, and I'm a professional engineer. I studied chemical engineering, but then did a big right-hand turn about 20 years ago and came to work for McQuay, now Daikin Applied Americas Incorporated. And I've worked in all the various businesses at Daikin Applied and enjoyed it immensely. And just over a year ago, I started working on, strategizing for what refrigerants we ought to use to replace our refrigerants in all of our products. And it's been fascinating because I dabble in a whole bunch of different things, whether it's talking to other manufacturers and suppliers, learning more about regulations and environmental issues, and also working, as I always love to do, closely with our product managers and our engineering folks to come up with our plans.
Very cool.
So, and I'm Susan Kaufman. I lead the marketing practice at Daikin Applied. I've been here for 5.5 years. I come from the world of consumer advertising, and one of the things that I'm really trying to help Daikin do is get on the map in the United States. We're the #1 brand globally, and so we've got a strong brand. We've got some really good engineering, good design products, and a lot of smarts around the world as well as in the United States. So we are here to put Daikin on the map and hopefully add some value to our customers.
Very, very cool. So with that being said, what's R32's competitor? Because as we were talking about before, when we phased R22 out, or during that phase out process of R22 to 410A, it was just 410A. And that actually happened right whenever I was getting into the industry. I was a service tech, and I remember learning the industry at the same time. I was learning R22, but then they were saying, well, you don't really have to learn much about this because we're phasing this out. Well, we still come across HVAC systems that are R22 systems, and now thankfully we use the Field P Smart Probes, so we can swap over to a different refrigerant on our cell phones, and it maps it all out for us properly. But back whenever I was starting, I remember having to remember subcool and superheat and the different temperatures in the PT chart for 22 versus 410 and all that fun stuff. But it's not going to be, even though that wasn't a super smooth transition, in my opinion, it's potentially not even going to be that smooth in the future. What's the competition that R32 has?
Okay, well, I think there's one primary competitor for R32, and R32 is a pure single component refrigerant. It's a single molecule. So it's kind of brings you back to those old R22 days. Mm-hmm. Same deal, right? Nice and easy to work with. Yeah. R410A is a blend, and it's a blend of 50% R32 and 50% R125. Now, why R410A has a relatively high GWP is because that R125 component is basically a fire retardant, and it doesn't perform very well. And it's got a super high GWP of, I always forget,
think it's about 3,500.
Well, at least the AR5 I have is 3,170. The fourth generation's probably closer to that number. And so basically what we're looking at doing is using the beneficial performing part of R410A, which is this pure single component R32. Now, there is an alternative that's being discussed, and that is R454B. And it is also 68.9% R32 and 31.1% of a refrigerant called R1234YF. And it has an ultra low GWP, but it also doesn't perform that well. So, and it's also an A2L in its pure sense. So they're both A2Ls. So what you're essentially doing is diluting the beneficial effects of the performance of R32 with this really low GWP component called 1234YF.
Now, this fire retardant that's being put into 132 or R32, that's because of what reason?
That's the R125. So in 410A,
okay.
R32 in itself is not an A1 classified or category refrigerant, whereas R32 is actually part of a category called an A2L, which is a mildly flammable refrigerant category.
Okay. Now, with that being said, the fear, like joking, like there was lots of jokes, memes, and everything else on Facebook and the Facebook groups and whatnot. We work on systems that have propane. They're basically propane systems, and we work on a lot of them in the refrigeration side of things. And I find that it's more dangerous to work on an R22 system or a 410A system that has a clog in it, and then the pressure's being built up in there and then exploding. I've actually had that happen to a couple of technicians over the past 10 years, 15 years, and I've found in my personal experience that is more dangerous currently than using this refrigerant. But how do you subside people's fear whenever it's something that's slightly flammable? Because I mean, in reality, gasoline is flammable, yet we use it every single day. We put it in vehicles every day, and the fear's not
Right.
there because of
Right.
using it all the time.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there's a lot of potential answers. I guess the first thing I ought to say is a politically correct statement, and that is that, I mean, clearly we at Daikin and me as a professional engineer,
Yeah.
I mean, my number one duty is safety of the general public.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Daikin as a good industry leader also feels that way. And I have to say the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, who represents every manufacturer and supplier across North America and perhaps globally, also takes it very seriously. So what we're trying to find is that balance of really great performance to provide excellent comfort, excellent value for contractors and technicians like yourself and like our listeners, as well as for homeowners, while also balancing the environment, but also making sure that it's safe. I would say when you talk about A2L refrigerants, yes, they're classified as mildly flammable, and that's never been allowed in the building codes. You pointed out existing systems can be dangerous if they're not managed correctly. You know, you need strong training, excellent best practices for your technicians, and that remains. And that's because even A1 refrigerants can burn at elevated temperatures.
Yeah.
A1 doesn't mean it's non-flammable. It means it won't propagate a flame at 60 degrees Celsius at standard pressures. But we all know you're working somewhere different, and you also have lubricants that can burn.
Yes.
Now, A2Ls are definitely mildly flammable at 60 degrees and standard pressure. What we know, though, is historically, since 2012, around the entire world, mostly in Japan since 2012, and that spread into Australia, India, Thailand. A lot of Europe are already using A2L. So more than 70 countries with over 100 million units are in operation. That's the estimate already, in a variety of systems. Most of them are residential splits, probably mini splits. You have window air conditioners, small charge systems using R32 here in the United States today. We have chillers and even packaged rooftops in Japan and Europe and perhaps elsewhere also using R32, 454B, and another refrigerant 452B also being published, and they're all A2Ls. And I'm not aware of any major safety incidences or fires that were caused by the fact that it was an A2L. Now, I guess that in itself is some history that might bring some comfort, but then we could get into discussions here about what's gone on in safety standards and change.
Yeah, that's a good point. Susan, go ahead and
Oh yeah,
say what you
I
got to say.
just building on I think what PJ said and just trying to simplify it, right? Because it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Is something that you had said, Tersh, about propane, and what we know is that that A2L refrigerant, they are really actually difficult to burn. R32 requires about 100 times more energy to ignite compared to propane, which is what you mentioned. So most common household appliances don't even carry enough energy to ignite R32. So we recognize, safety absolutely comes first, but the fact that it's used safely around the rest of the world, we think that has a pretty good track record of 100 million units to demonstrate its safety.
So perfectly said, Susan. I do have a question about the difference in sizes of stuff, because we all know that the SEER rating standards are not going to go down. You're not going to be able to go to a 10 SEER system. So if we go up to a 16 or a 17 or even 18 SEER minimums in the future, like what are we going to be doing physically dimension wise to residential systems? Is there any, like, is R32 going to be able to hold a smaller surface area or than the 454B?
Yeah, I believe so. And there's actually published reports from NIST and others that compare the theoretical thermodynamic performance of these refrigerants. And then, of course, there's been a lot of testing by third parties as well as companies like Daikin Applied. It's very clear that R32 has about a 10% capacity advantage over R410A. So by definition, why does that mean? Well, it means that it has tremendous heat transfer capability, which means you can make units with less material for the same efficiency, perhaps more compact. You can move a lot less refrigerant through the system, and that's what allows that to happen. So you can get, basically, what I can tell is the smaller of any footprint or volume of a unit, providing great flexibility for installers and homeowners.
That's really cool.
R32 as compared to 410A.
If we could get back to a 17-inch wide air handler, that would be amazing. Because
we'll work on that for you guys.
We put them up in the attics, and they're always it's a 21-inch, 24-inch wide attic, and the cabinets will be a 23.5 with the little screws sticking out that get caught every single time.
Well, that's the one thing that we know for sure, and you might have seen our display at AHR, but we did do a 410A unit next to an R32 unit, and since there's 100 million R32 HVAC systems out there in the world, it was pretty easy to bring that into our display. But the R32 unit, for the same efficiency, is a lot more compact and a lot lighter weight than the R410A unit. So we know that we are going to be able to offer some more compact and lighter weight units in the future.
That's awesome.
Now, Susan brought up the efficiency too. R32's inherent benefits mean it's actually more energy efficient than R410A as well.
Absolutely.
So not only can you get more capacity, you can get more efficiency. So that helps in that regard for your original question. Now, the cool thing is efficiencies only matter at rated capacity, right?
Right.
So if you're running a pretty high-tech inverter-based system, it's pretty neat, right? If you're going to rate something at, say, nominal 5 tons of cooling, Well, that R32 in that same system will deliver, 10% more. So you can slow down the compressor, right? And so in turn, that's where you get your efficiency. So you're drawing less watts. And when you're doing something like that in the same unit, you might be picking up 8, 9, 10, 12% efficiency at, you know, you know, across the whole operating range.
That's really cool. Do you think that that's going to do away with some two-speed systems? Because uh, in my personal opinion, so the way that we sell things,
yeah,
we either sell an XR14 or 14 series system, single stage, or an inverter-driven system.
Okay.
We skip over the two-speed, and because the price point is so close to the inverters, that in my opinion the inverters provide more comfort than the two speeds do.
Right.
What's your thoughts on?
Well, I probably shouldn't speak for residential systems, and I'll say in general,
You're good.
like in general, it's a very complicated equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are dealing with costs of inverters, costs of typically electronic expansion valves, and there's, and the controllers, which is very different than a two-stage compressor.
Very true.
Now, in our Daikin Applied world, we saw water source heat pumps with those technologies, and sure enough, we still see those same breaks. I'd certainly hate to speculate on, or just don't know the answer for would it do away with two-stage compression. I doubt it, simply because those technologies are out there and they're readily available.
Good point. Yeah. That's a good point. So that's my only tangents that I have written down from that what you were talking about there. I think that's really cool.
I would love to get back to the whole point about efficiency, right? Because whereas our 454B is gonna have a slightly lower GWP than R32, we really can't look at it as just a conversation about the direct emissions, right? When you add up the direct and the indirect emissions from any system, what you really want to look at is the total emissions output, right? And a more efficient system is going to use less electricity, and most of what the system uses, most of the emissions come from the electricity draw, not from
the production of the refrigerant itself. Yeah.
Right. So we're really looking at the total emissions when you add the direct and the indirect, the direct and the indirect emissions. So we know that R32, because of its efficiency gains, has a lower total footprint.
So if we have the manufacturer that uses, if there's a manufacturer that ends up using 454B Bravo, will their equipment will have to be larger because it's less efficient? Is that accurate statement?
Yeah, I mean, let's say the compressors had the same sort of motors and technology. You're using the same heat transfer technology. So let's argue all else being the same, and all you want to do is swap out the refrigerants. Generally speaking, to achieve the same capacity, the R32 unit would be more compact if it was optimized, smaller sizes, a lot less material. And that goes for the efficiency as well, because it is more efficient than 454B. So
it's just so hard to beat the thermodynamic properties of R32. It's got excellent thermodynamic properties, and that's why it's used as the base for other blends like R410A and even R454B.
Yeah, it's the basis of any blends being discussed, really.
I know that it says it's purely speculation, but is there a chance that going to this refrigerant, we could see less evap coil leakage because of not having to use as thin of a wall for that thermodynamic, that transfer? Only thing I think of. So here in the South, our coils stay wet all year long. It's a humid. I'm in Savannah, Georgia. I don't know if I even told y'all that.
Wow.
So it's even in the wintertime, it's dehumidifying sometimes, a lot of times. And so we have a lot of evap coil replacements. It's not uncommon for us to swap out evap coils twice a week,
Oh, wow.
I'm serious. Yeah, we go through evap coils like nonstop. And when I first got into the industry, I didn't believe that that was like it was that much. So we would solder the ends of them and tank them and watch the bubbles come up from them. And what I was told is between the VOCs and all of in the everything inside the house, and then having to go to a thinner copper because we rarely had the situation happen in R22 coils, but when we swapped over to 410 coils, when the whole system swapped over, we were told that they had to go to a thinner copper for the heat transfer. And I didn't know how much validity there was in that comment or not. And if we can go back to a thicker copper, if that is the case, so that we can not have quite as many. I mean, don't get me wrong, we make money on some evap coil change outs. So like, I don't really hate that, but at the same time, for our consumers, it's nice to be able to say, look, we have an evap coil that's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, I'm going to say that I don't think the change in refrigerants, whether it's a move to, away from 410A to 32 or to another blend, will have much of a direct effect on
Okay.
that. What I will say though is we probably need to get smarter and wiser about how we design our coils and manufacture our coils and how we select them. So if copper is a problem, right, then a lot of manufacturers are now moving to all aluminum coils, whether it's an aluminum tube, aluminum fin, or even microchannel. And we've done that on some products, and I know that Goodman Industries has on their residential units as well, with a lot of success. Number two, the new safety standards that are put in place have some specific requirements around tubing design in the equipment as well as out in the space. And the idea there was to put best practices into the safety standards to have fewer leaks. So to me, I think now that the UL listing will force that to happen within equipment, these best practices. An example is, bends in the tubing, can't be really tight bends, and because that puts stress on the piping.
Yep.
So to me, I think long term we'll get better and better in that regard, but I'm not certain it's refrigerant specific.
Gotcha. Cool. And then the pressures, I meant to ask this earlier. The pressures, I assume, are going to be lower than the 410A.
Actually, they're a little tiny bit higher with R32.
Oh, they're higher than with R32.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. In other words, all your practices with 410A will hold with R32. I mean, the increase is almost negligible.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And when would we know, like, when this is going to take place or not take place, or when do we find that out?
That's a great question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wish I knew when all this that it makes it very interesting. What we know is that California is leading North America in terms of wanting to phase down HFCs like R410A.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they've set a date of January of 2023 to move to refrigerants to replace 410A, and they need to have a GWP under 750. And R32 does meet that requirement. Right now, they're still formulating their rules, and we're hoping to know more by June or July. What we really hope is that the federal government is successful with the AIM Act, which would create a countrywide policy or standard. And my guess is as good as yours, but I would think that if that is successful, and it has a lot of support from both Republicans and Democrats, which is really cool, because it brings a lot of money and makes our industry more competitive, because these laws are already in place around the globe. So we have to be competitive with them because we sell internationally.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
And I think the federal act would make sure that we don't have a large patchwork of regulation state to state to state. And I would guess that that would come online after 2023. I don't know if it'll be 2025, 2026, but something like that. So there's plenty of time. That's what I would guess.
It sounds like plenty of time, but I remember, like, when I think back, like 2002, it feels like yesterday. So it'll catch up on us really quickly, for
Yes,
sure.
it will.
So I was in the middle of thinking of something the whole time that you. Oh, I know what it was. Okay. So I should have asked this in the beginning, but anybody that is listening to this, what wh- why is 410A bad? Like the GWP, like can you explain what that is really fast for anybody that may not understand why GWP, a high GWP is bad?
Well, it's all about climate change. So global warming potential, that's what they used to call it. A lot of people call it climate change. Basically, our 410A has a GWP right around 2,000, and which means it's for every pound of it, it has 2,000 times more um, potential for global warming than carbon dioxide. So, a very small quantity leaked to the environment can have
Wow.
a direct impact on the surface temperature of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gist of it. It was a problem that we knew about in 2002, but no one was really ready to talk about climate change back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we are now. It's becoming a reality.
So the R32 compared to 410A, what's the GWP on 32?
Yeah, R32 has an official GWP, so that's the pound for pound basis of 675.
Oh yeah.
So what's that? 68% lower than R410A. Now the cool thing is, because of those heat transfer capabilities, that excellent thermodynamic performance of 32, is you can use anywhere between 20 to 40% less of it within the same system for the same capacity. So in reality, it has an effective GWP of somewhere in that 400 to 450 range.
Yeah, so you can use less, plus it has a lower GWP to start with, so that
Right,
makes it all around even better product.
right. And then we talked about the efficiency benefit too.
Yeah.
If we take advantage of that efficiency benefit and say you only bump your system efficiency by 5% over 410A, that's huge over the lifetime of the equipment.
Oh
Because
yeah.
the equipment that you're installing lasts what, 15 to 20 years, sometimes longer,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be operating that equipment at a higher efficiency level for a longer period of time, which means our power generation that typically burns fossil fuels, less fossil fuels will be generated. And then even on top of that, if you want to get past the environmental side, lower cost of operation because you're consuming less energy. So
Absolutely.
R32 does all of that too.
So, last question that I have, and you may have no idea what this answer is because it's probably not even closely remotely in your department. At what point would a manufacturer ever start requiring duct blasting systems so that we know the actual, or better, maybe it's better worded, provide the field SEER rating, or um, you know what I'm getting at?
No,
When
you got to start
when
over.
are
Start
go-
over.
when
Mark
are we going to mark that? So when are we going to get a requirement to say, because okay, so here's my point. Here's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
I can install a 20 SEER system. I can install an inverter driven 20 SEER system, ducted system into a home with trash ductwork, with
Yeah.
a 5-ton unit with a 12-inch flex return. Like I can just do the worst of the worst. And then the manufacturer is required to replace that evap coil when we went through a heat cycle in the heat pump, and it just constantly going out on head pressure because the ductwork's trash.
Yeah.
At what point does a manufacturer say, you're attaching our equipment that works properly, that is designed to last 15, 20 years, to ductwork that is grossly undersized, no manual D is performed, no manual J, nothing is performed properly on this house. It's purely guesswork. We want numbers after the fact, even if it's, going around with just holding up a not whatever you call it. I'm having a brain fart. Shoot, whatever. You're just measuring airflow. You're adding subcool superheat to this chart, and so we can calculate the formula, and we know the active SEER rating of this equipment. As we're
Yeah.
putting it in.
Well, I have a cop out in my answer. I don't work in residential. I work for Daikin Applied. So
We can hook you up
I'm,
though, Church. We'd love to have somebody from our residential
yeah,
division to help you answer some more of those questions because
I
those
just
are good questions.
I just feel like I see because we like blower motors, X13 blower motors on a residential system that has trash ductwork or a dual zone system with no bypass or something not set up properly and it's killing these X13 motors
yeah.
and it's installer's error all 100% and our consumers are getting upset because they're having to fork out the labor portion of this. And I can only imagine what the manufacturer would, I mean, I can only imagine what y'all spend in warranty claims every year.
Hard to say on the residential side. I mean, even on the applied side, I ran a business where we're selling hundreds of units, sometimes thousands in jobs, large
Yeah.
multi-family jobs. And sure enough, you see some at times application errors or design errors, but um, that's typically where we have a tech support function that works hand in hand with our customer, who is typically the mechanical contractor,
Hmm.
and with our selling agent or our own internal sales force. And a lot of the time, we're finding compromises and working together to solve it. And that's what we do.
Susan,
So I have a total tangent if I can throw it in.
throw it in there.
Just getting back to the
Yeah.
R32
Yeah.
conversation.
Mhm.
It sounds self-serving, obviously, because Daikin is an HVAC manufacturer. We do manufacture refrigerants, although we don't manufacture R32 in the United States. But what we're doing is really trying to position for the long term, the entire industry for the long term. One of the things that we're thinking sort of short term about, when is this legislation going to change out in 2023, 2024, even 2025? But the demand for air conditioning, like right now, we've got only 1.5 billion people in the world using air conditioning, and by 2050, we're going to have 5.6 billion people using air conditioning. So that growth of air conditioning is going to triple over the next 30 years. And that's why this is a really important conversation to have right now. If we don't put controls on our HFC emissions and switch from higher global warming potential refrigerants, we know that we're going to contribute to that temperature rise that we're really trying to hold. The world is trying to hold down to a temperature rise under 2 degrees Celsius. But the right refrigerant choice is going to help limit that temperature rise to 0.06 degrees Celsius. And that really shows the effect of switching down refrigerants and going into this new classification of lower GWP refrigerants. That's the benefit for the long-term play. Some of us are not going to be around in 2050. I hope that I am. But we're really thinking about it for what we're going to offer this next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And you say it's self-serving, but it's not self-serving at the same time because you're not even manufacturing the refrigerant in the US. So
No, we're not.
it's not something that like you're going to make this huge profit. And even if you were manufacturing refrigerant, you could also manufacture the other refrigerant as well. I mean,
Yep.
you're a refrigerant manufacturer, so I get that 100%. But what can we do on our end to help even the AIM Act go through? I mean, is there anything that we can do? Do you know any?
Yeah. I think AHRI sent out messages, and I don't know if other industry organizations have. They probably have, where everyone agrees we want one simple law. And what I would do is go online, see what AHRI has to say about it.
Okay.
Maybe check out your other industry organizations, like ACA is a big one, and then let your politicians know. There's an act, there's a version that was initiated in the Senate. Talk to your local representatives, your local senators, about getting that done. Influence them. And I know there was a version in the House as well, so you could talk to your Congress
Hmm.
members in your local area and influence them as well. That would certainly help.
Yeah, I totally agree with PJ. And I think what's so great about the AIM Act is it's totally bipartisan. You can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican, and there's something for our industry really to get behind.
Very cool. Very cool. I like it. Is there anything that I forgot to ask? I like to ask that at the end. I always throw people for a loop. You know
I don't think so.
which one really throws you for a loop is what is and you may have already seen this question on the questionnaire that I sent out earlier. But what is your childhood smell like?
That's an awesome question. I can totally answer this too. I think that the biggest flashback I have to childhood is pine trees from walking through the Minnesota woods at summer camp when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And so when I smell the pine trees in the fall and in the spring, that just totally reminds me of childhood. That's such a great question, Tersh.
Pine trees make me sneeze the pollen and everything turns yellow here. So we actually live on a pine tree farm, and
Oh,
so
wow.
everything turns yellow several times a year.
Amazing. My childhood smell memory is being on many lakes in the boat with my grandpa, my dad, my uncle,
Sunscreen.
fishing. Actually, it was all pre-sunscreen probably, but fishing. And
Very cool.
whether we caught anything or not, whether we're being chased home by the rain, whether it was just doing that. And to me, that always brings a smile to my face when I think about it. And that's what I'm going to do this weekend.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been chased home by the rain a couple of times, and it's terrifying but exciting at the exact same time. You're like flying to the dock, and that's really cool. Thank you all for sharing that. And then with that being said, if anybody has any questions, if they have any questions about any of this stuff, what's the best way to reach out or learn more from y'all?
Susan, why don't you?
Sure. I'd invite them to email me directly. My email address is susan.kaufman@daikinapplied.com. I get a lot of emails every day, but I certainly do try my very best to get back to every individual inquiry and just put something in your subject line that said, question following up from Tersh Blissett.
Yeah, awesome, perfect. And for everybody that's listening to this podcast, thank you for listening to the show. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to either one of them, or reach out to myself. And as always, my email is tersh@serviceinfo.com, or tersh@icebound.us. I have lots of them, but they all come to me. They come to my phone. But with that being said, thank you for listening to this show, watching the show, and have a great day. And we'll talk again next week.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Tersh.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.